Welcome to My Latest Fixation. I'm Joshua, and I'm constantly challenging myself to look at this beautifully warped world through a slightly different lens. From the lonely cryptids lurking into the static to the social mysteries of the digital age, like why our online friends never quite look the way we expect them to. This is my way of deconstructing horror, gaming, obscure history, and the wonderfully strange puzzle of human connection. So pull up a chair, put your headphones in, and let's learn something. Think about the last time you were out in the world, but you weren't on the clock and you weren't at home on the couch. Maybe you were leaning up against the counter at a local shop or sitting on a bench in a public square just watching the world go by. There's a specific kind of magic in those spaces. The spots that aren't work and aren't home, but feel like they belong to everyone. But as our world gets faster and more digital, I've been wondering, where do we go when we want to just exist without an invitation or a deadline? To help me untangle the history and the future of these third places, I'm joined today by a guest who spends a lot of time thinking about how we build our community and the spaces that hold us together, my friend Laura. Laura is a social worker who primarily specializes in child and adolescent mental health. Having grown up in a rural community, she brings a perspective shaped by both small-town culture and an understanding of barriers to social engagement and access. Outside of work, she enjoys spending time with her 2 cats, going to local breweries with friends, and traveling with her fiancé. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So do you know what a third place is?
I do, but I do not have the definition off the top of my head, so I have a feeling that you might.
Yes, of course. Yes. So it is essentially it is a concept coined by sociologist Ray Oldenburg. The concept basically is if your first place is your home and your second place is where you work or where you're productive, then the third place is everything else. It's sort of the anchor of community life. It's the neighborhood cafe, the public library, the park, or even the local pub. It's a space where you're a regular, where the conversation is the main event, and most importantly, where you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money just to exist, which is kind of cool. Oldenburg didn't just give us this sort of vague idea. He actually laid out 8 specific pillars that defined a true third place. So I want to run through these because once you hear them, you're going to start looking at every building in your neighborhood differently.
Oh, okay.
So, Oldenburg's 8 specific pillars that define a true third place. Number 1, neutral ground. It's a place where individuals may come and go as they please. No one is required to play a host, and everyone feels comfortable and at home. Number 2, the leveler. This is a big one. It's supposed to be an inclusive space. Your economic or social status doesn't matter. It's a place where the who's who and the who's that are on equal footing. Number 3 is conversation is the main activity. It's not about watching a movie or sharing at a screen. The pulse of the place is talk, usually lively, sparkling, and engaging. Number 4, a third place has to be easy to get to. It's open during the hours when you aren't at work, and it's usually within a walking distance or a short hop away. Number 5, the regulars. A third place is just a room until the regulars show up. They give the place its soul. When you walk in, you see familiar faces that make the space feel alive. Number 6, a low profile. These places are usually plain. They're not trying to be impressive or impress anyone with high-end decor. If it's too fancy, it starts to feel exclusive, which kills the whole leveler vibe. Number 7, the mood is playful. This isn't a place for heavy, somber business meetings. The prevailing mood is of wit, play, and lightheartedness. It's where you go to decompress. And then bringing in number 8, a home away from home. Finally, it's about the feeling. You have the same sense of warmth and belonging as you do in your own living room, without the responsibilities of being the one who has to clean up afterwards.
That's an important one.
It is very much an important one. So of those sort of 8, which one do you think is the hardest to find in 2026?
That's a good question. I feel like all 8 of them potentially could be tough to get all 8 of them together in one spot, or at least like not something we see all the time anymore. But out of those, I think the 4th one that you said, like the easy to get to or like the accessible piece, is the most difficult one now that at least I see in my community. I live in a pretty like rural area, and transportation is like a huge barrier for so many people. And so like if you don't have a driver's license or don't have your own car, it's really, really difficult to get to any of these spaces. Public transportation is like really specific in where they go and like how you navigate that system. And so it's not like a super easy thing to do to like get to all of these places.
No, I agree. Actually, I think that's a huge problem in a lot of cities nowadays. Obviously, you know this, but I just recently moved to a new city. It is really nicely laid out, and I'm lucky enough that I am like within walking distance of several places. But they're sort of separated into these boroughs, and each borough has its own sort of unique identity. And it's a really good example of what a place is actually. In the past, I mean, I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville, growing up, I mean, we had to sort of drive everywhere, and it's just not a very walkable city in general. And I know at one point in time, I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and Asheville is very different. Like, yes, you kind of have to drive to go places, but once you're there, you can park. Yes. And then you can walk around, and it does feel really nice. There is still that idea, though, that like, what do you do if you don't have public transportation?
Yeah.
So I would definitely agree with that. And as far as accessibility, I mean, there are so many programs out there, and I know we're going to kind of get into this a little bit later, but there's so many programs out there that exist for that exact reason, right? I know there are more and more places that are offering like discounted bus passes and free transportation. I mean, I think it's in Chattanooga that they actually have a free bus line.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool thing. You can sort of stay on one end of the sort of the city and take this free bus line all throughout the night to the other end. I went as a student once, and we went to like a theater convention, and our hotel was on one side, the convention center was the other, but there was also like a Ben and Jerry's down the street. And so that was 1,000% what we did afterwards.
Yes.
So, okay, cool. So before we really get into sort of what are these sort of historical examples of these spaces, I do want to share one example that I know you and I, Laura, were both part of. So I saw this concept of third place sort of develop firsthand during Hurricane Helene. At the time, I was living with my roommate and his fiance, Laura. And the power goes out, and we're suddenly I think I don't know if you remember this or not, but I had worked super late the night before.
Yes.
And so I came home, plugged in my phone, and went to sleep. And at this point in time, it wasn't uncommon for me to not wake up until like noon.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, and I think I woke up at like 11 or something, and I was just like, oh, wow, what a great day. And I looked up and I was like, I don't have any phone signal. What's going on? I walked out, and you're like, I remember you both were just like, hey, buddy, so some stuff happened.
I remember my fiance had just made a pot of coffee before the power went out. And so that was like, we didn't know it, of course, but that would be like the last hot coffee we would have for like days. And I remember at first, like, of course you don't know what's going to be as bad as it is until like it's there. But we were playing this game of trying to see if the pool in y'all's apartment complex was going to like overflow. And so we kept looking out the window, drinking our coffee, like watching the water rise of the pool. And then you get up and you're like, what's going on? And we're like, we've been around for hours. Like neither of us can work, because I was going to work like virtually that day, but we had no power, no signal. I remember that was the big one. Like the cell signal was going in and out. And so like we couldn't do anything. And I think we started playing cards or something like that, because we didn't know how long the power would be out.
I will say I learned to play poker.
I learned how to beat you at poker.
Yes, because you learned how to beat me at poker. Thanks to your fiance. But yeah, I mean, it was honestly just not something, obviously Hurricane Helene was horrible. There was so many bad sides of it, but there was this like nice sense of community that fostered between the three of us, and just kind of trying to figure out what the heck is going on. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting is, there our apartment complex at night, the quad sort of in between all of the buildings, became sort of this organic third place. Mm-hmm. I think it was day 2 or day 3, and I look out the window and I'm like, there's a fire out there. Like there's like a
dug a hole in the ground and
yeah. Somebody's like, yeah, whatever. Like we'll just start this bonfire. But I can't even remember if y'all went out first. I think I went out first, and then I came back up and I was like, guys, you should come out here.
Yeah.
I went out there, and there's just this group of people there. And I was like, oh, maybe they'll have information. Maybe they'll know what's going on, and they can tell me a little bit more. Maybe they heard from people because, again, for context for listeners at home, I think it was the first 5 days we couldn't leave the complex because both of the entrances had trees blocking us in. So this is sort of the first place that I was able to get any sort of information at all. And one of the people that was there was actually the head maintenance man. So there was a maintenance man who lived at the apartments at that point in time, which really worked out in our favor. So we have this maintenance man who's there every single night. We have these neighbors who live next to each other for years without sort of speaking. And suddenly they're all showing up to this bonfire, and they're also bringing like canned food and stuff that they found, and of course like beer and wine and all sorts of other stuff, like things that are going to go bad, and they're like, whatever, we're going to cook it all here.
Yes, I remember, like, that was one of the biggest things I remember from that time was just like the resource sharing. I remember, I think the same guy that kind of started the bonfire, like he also like did like a big pot of chili like over the charcoal grill, and like everyone just kind of chipped in. Because again, at that point, like you don't know like how long this is going to last. Every day just feels like forever. Like I know it was like 5 days mainly that we really had like the time that we were really stuck at the apartment until we could kind of like all figure out like what ways to go next. But those 5 days felt so long. Like it was really tough. And so like being able, like you said, to like talk to other people that like you might have been beside for years but never actually talked to, and to be able to find like that common ground and share resources without asking questions and like just being there for each other was really like the thing that I think back a lot with the hurricane, like thinking about how all of the communities, like these rural communities in Western North Carolina, like really all came together to try to check up on each other and help each other.
That's incredibly true. It was a neutral ground, and it's sort of the the ultimate leveler, which is a super positive thing in the social context. Like obviously it was a disaster and it was terrible, and all the stuff, but it was really nice to see the community come together in that way. And I know we were kind of talking a little bit about this ahead of time, but could you share what you were telling me about the grocery store? Because this is sort of after 5 days, we found out the entrance is cleared. We're going and searching for cell signal and all of that stuff. And we go and check in on one of our friends.
Yes.
The other Josh.
Even that in it, there's a lot of Joshes that are in the area. But even that in itself, it's like you can't go like call anyone or text anyone. Like there were only like really specific places that we had to drive to even get to like cell service for a couple of minutes sometimes, and that was really hard. Or even I remember because we all like it was an abandoned Kmart parking lot that we all ended up like in to try to get signal, and so you would like see people around. And I remember in particular, there was a lady there that seemed really distraught and was kind of walking around, and she just could not get signal. And so she came up to me and asked me to borrow my phone. And like, I didn't know this lady. And it turns out she had driven like 45 minutes to try to get to this location to try to call her daughter who lived out of state to tell her she was okay. And like her husband was okay. And she was like, I was panicking. I couldn't get cell signal. I don't know anyone here. I'm not from here. But I figured if I could find a girl who probably like has a mom that could like, you would understand that like I need to let my daughter know that I'm okay. And so after that, we went and checked up on a local friend, another Josh, and again, just showed up, and he was hanging around because there's not anything else to do. And I think a couple of us kind of like ended up landing there. He had a grill, and so we were able to have like our a hot meal for the first time in like several days. And I remember it was like really nice quality steak that my fiance was like saving in the freezer, but we were like, this is the opportunity to like have this, and we're eating it with our hands because like we don't have like a way to wash utensils or anything. And so we did that, and then we found out, again, word of mouth, that a local grocery store to his house was accepting like cash, because again, everything's down. That was a big thing too. Like something that I do differently now is I try to make sure I have more cash than I carried before, because like there was really like no way to function or like buy any goods or anything without having just cash on you. And I know luckily you had a good bit of cash on you too, which was helpful. But we stood in line forever at this grocery store. And again, we're talking to the people around us. We're sharing stories. We're talking about what happened as we like started to notice that this was really going to be a big deal. And then we get in there. We're like, okay, it's like kind of again, the Asheville area, kind of a hippie store and like a lot of like organic food and stuff, not necessarily somewhere that I would have like shopped on a regular basis. And I remember, Josh, you were so excited to see yerba mate there because you were like, I haven't had caffeine in days. Like we were doing, I think, trying our best to make cold brew coffee with like the coffee grounds that we had left over, but you were like, I need caffeine. Like I have a headache. But yeah, definitely being able to like talk through those pieces and then again share what we had. Like I think we all went back to the house and just kind of put our stuff together and like we're like, okay, like we can all kind of use these resources together.
No, 1,000%. And yes, I was very, very excited to have yerba mate because it's first of all, it's very expensive now, but it was really great to, we're in this really wonderful grocery store that was kind enough to give us what they could. And obviously it helped them out too, but it was a local shop as well. So they could probably be a little bit more lax about some things. And, they were doing cash only, but I'm walking through and I'm like, wow, they're like all of this stuff requires electricity to cook or whatever. And then I find the holy grail, which is the cases of the yerba, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be amazing. And yeah, I think I bought, I think it was 2 or 3 cases. It was quite.
You bought quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and I knew
you lived off of that, and then like cold Domino's pizza for like several days. That's what we lived off of.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's all you can do, really. Yeah. No, it was really great. And I know later on, I ended up going and working with, funnily enough, with Domino's to hand out pizzas and things like that, which was just nice. It was like a nice disaster relief thing that we were doing because it was just free. And for anyone that's listening at home, no, Domino's did not pay me. I'm just talking about this because I thought it was a really cool thing that we did. But we brought in pizza trucks and brought in water from other states and like just made it so that people could come and pick up a large pizza for their family.
Because I think too, it's important to note for like people that are not like super familiar with like the logistics of what happened is like a lot of aid was sent to the area, but it took days to be able to access certain areas. And so we were lucky enough that it took like a handful of days and then we were able to like get aid. And like I remember seeing a lot of like military vehicles and like a lot of like people coming in to like get like pass out MREs and like cases of water. And like we were able to get resources in, but it took a long time because we are in like such a mountainous area and there were a lot of landslides. The river, like even now, like going on I guess a year and a half, almost 2 years since it happened. Even now, like there's still areas that are just so impacted. And so it just took a really, really long time to get help to some of these places.
Yeah, well, and then there were also places like Florida that had a day or so before it hit us had been hit, and so there are all these forces that are mobilized out to there to help them. And then they're having to sort of go, oh, okay, crap, we've got to stop and like sort of redistribute this aid to Western North Carolina on top of it.
Yeah, and especially because like Florida is like kind of like more used to like this kind of event happening. And like I grew up in Western North Carolina and like we've never, ever, ever had this happen. Like I remember like I didn't prepare at all. And because I was like, oh, it'll just rain. Like we get rain all the time, no worries. And then my partner who is from like up north where they would get like a lot of really bad snow and ice and then have the power off for like weeks was like, no, we need to like fill the bathtub with water, we need to go to the grocery store, we need to fill gas in our cars, and I was just like, okay, like you do what you need to do, but like I don't think it's a big deal. And then it turned out being like such a big deal, and like I was so grateful that he was able to like prep for those things.
I mean, he quite literally saved I think
us alive.
all of
like,
us.
Truly,
Yeah,
truly, the two of us, he kept us alive.
Yeah, no, because I thought the same thing. I was like, it's not a big deal. Like, not that it wasn't a big deal, but I was like, I don't need to fill up my bathtub. This is ridiculous. And
then
I'm like,
go to the pool and get like buckets of water from the pool.
Yeah, to flush down the toilet. Yeah, goodness gracious. It was a crazy time for sure, but it was really interesting to see how we were sort of forced out of our private silos, right?
Yeah.
We were sort of forced to talk to people and step outside of our place and find somewhere else to socialize. I mean, it really felt like we were back a couple hundred years, which is a really good spot for us to talk about where this all started, right? Which is about 300 years ago, people weren't waiting for a hurricane to find a connection. They were finding it at the bottom of a coffee cup. We shouldn't really need a hurricane to find neutral ground. And if you look back through history, humans have always found this sort of deep-seated, they always had this deep-seated need to hang out, right? To find social networking. If you go back to the Greek agoras or the Roman Forum, those are sort of the original blueprints, open-air markets that doubled as a city's heart. They were basically the permanent versions of our bonfire quad. To understand it, we have to talk about what people were drinking before coffee arrived. Now, there's this common fact, for lack of a better term, because it's not, I mean, history has sources and all of that stuff, but it's, what is a fact, right? But there's this common fact that everyone drank ale because the water was dirty. And while the water was contaminated, they didn't have any germ theory yet. They just knew that when you drank from the well and it made you sick, and that beer didn't, right? So that's the best excuse I've ever heard for somebody to drink a beer. So what they were unknowingly doing was called the fermentation filter. The brewing process involved boiling water, and hops acted as a preservative. So they were mostly drinking what's called small beer, which is a low alcohol, nutrient dense brew that was basically liquid bread. It kept you hydrated without knocking you out. And one of the things I actually thought was really interesting about this is it wasn't just adults drinking it, where, it's a men, women, children, we're all drinking this stuff. And it was such a low alcohol content that it didn't really leave you like drunk or buzzed. I mean, I'm sure if you drank enough of it, sure. Imagine an entire society that was for centuries in a state of mild, continuous sedation. The third place was the local tavern, right? It was rowdy, it was sluggish. The psychological effect, of course, was a depressant. So that's sort of the state of the world at this point, right? Is you've got everybody drinking a small batch brew, you've got a depressant going, you've got, everybody's sort of sluggish. Like there's not really a lot of access to all these clean water or any of this stuff. But then in the mid 1600s, something arrives, which is coffee.
Yay!
Yes, coffee, our favorite thing in the world. So suddenly the third place moves from an ale house to a coffee house, right? So we sort of shift from this depressant to a stimulant, and people weren't slumped over their drinks anymore. They were sharp, alert, and most importantly, they were talking. So Tom Standage wrote about this in A History of the World in 6 Glasses, and he talks literally how it shifted and fueled the Age of Enlightenment. These places became known as what was called a penny university. So for a single penny, you get a bowl of coffee, a newspaper, and a seat at a communal table.
Oh, love that.
Yes, yeah, no, and this is where that sort of like leveler pillar really shines. In the coffee house, you had this equality of the bench where a merchant could sit next to a nobleman and they debate as equals. So I'm really curious, though, looking at that shift from the rowdy tavern to an intellectual coffee house, which environment do you think does a better job of actually building a community?
I think it's funny that like you're talking about this too, because I know you mentioned like Asheville being a place that you lived in the past, and like I feel like that is like brewery city, but then also there's a lot of coffee shops, and so it's like I'm sure, well, I know both of us have had our fair share of like being in both of these environments of like more of the breweries and then more of like the coffee shops as well. I do know that like a lot of people also, because I know you talked to about like a third place being a place where you don't have work, and like so it's like separate from work, separate from home. But I wonder if like the fact that some people now work out of coffee shops with like a lot of like working from home, like virtual things going on right now, if like that impacts that a little bit. Especially like I feel like you kind of have your like local coffee shop or two that like you go to work that you know is a good one to work. But of the people that I know that do that, they don't necessarily go to that coffee shop when they're not working. They like kind of have that separated from like a place that they would go on like a Saturday morning with friends.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thought. So when I was in Nashville, I used to go to a tiki bar a lot.
Love the tiki bar.
Love the tiki bar. And it was, for me, a third place, right?
Yes.
Because I went, and there is a lot of argument. We'll kind of talk later on about this, like that some of the criticisms of this, but like there's an argument to be made that it really is about how you approach it, right? So for your example of somebody working from a coffee shop, that's not a third place technically, right? Because they're there for work, and in their mindset, they're here to work.
Yeah.
And so what does that do for the people around them who are there to have fun and have a third place? And that there's a lot of debate in that.
I think that, yeah, that's a good point. I think it can be so specific to each individual person on like what what they would consider their third space. Because I know like in college, I used to work at a coffee shop, like I was a barista. And so like during that time, and then for a while afterwards, I was like, I don't really want to spend time in a coffee shop if I don't have to, because I associate it with work. And I imagine like people potentially who like maybe are bartenders or work in breweries, maybe they feel similarly. So maybe it just depends on the person too.
One of my really good friends who I think you and your fiance met them at the tiki bar. They were one of the bartenders, and
Yes.
we became friends because they were my bartender.
Yeah.
And they ended up just becoming a friend outside of that as well. I actually talked to them a little bit about this concept, and they always said that for them, it was the people that were coming in would affect how they viewed that shift.
Interesting.
So if they had their regulars coming in that they felt like were their friends that they could just sit and talk with, then that suddenly becomes this weird hybrid of like, yes, I'm at work and I have to do my job, but this is also this place where I could decompress. But then they would have shifts where it's like, okay, well, suddenly now we've got slammed where there's like 30 people. I don't know any of them, and they're all coming in as a group. It's a really, really kind of cool concept of like, yeah, does that now become a third place or no? Because that's their work, right? And so you see these industries where you have a lot of overlap of, what is customer service, what is, working in the hospitality industry, and what does that look like for you when you're not at work? Like you mentioned, not wanting to go to a coffee shop anymore. So somebody that works in, let's say, a restaurant or a coffee shop or a brewery or a bar, where does their third place like become then? Because if they're doing this for a living, then are they actually really sort of like creating the sort of separation in their brain of like, now I'm off work and I'm having this thing?
Yeah, for sure. And I think another piece of that, like, again, kind of going back to that accessibility piece, and I feel like most of our conversation so far has kind of been around like adult third spaces. Like I always wonder too about like, where do teenagers go? Like where are their third spaces? That is such like there's not a ton of places for them to go, because like they can't go to breweries and like they can go to coffee shops, but like I do feel like there's a piece of it that like if you stay for a really long time without like buying a latte, like you start to get some looks of like you're taking up some space where like some paying customers could be. And so that's something I look at my work all the time, working with adolescents, of like wanting them to have a safe place where they're not in like danger of getting into trouble. They're not at home, they're not at school, but like where do they go? Like where can they go where they have like still some like supervision, they're not doing anything dangerous, but it's separated from those places. And I feel like there's just not as many spots for them anymore.
There's actually definitely not. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we hit the section of talking about third places nowadays and what is happening with this digital age. But the short answer is a lot of people are viewing places like TikTok and Instagram as a third place.
Interesting. Definitely got some thoughts about that.
Yeah, no, and I want to get into that for sure. I'm going to finish talking a little bit about the history. We kind of talked a little bit about these intellectual coffee houses, right? What was fascinating about them is they were so popular, they actually even caused a bit of a scandal.
Oh, I love a scandal.
In 1674, there was actually a women's petition against coffee.
Ooh.
Now, I'm kind of bearing the lead a little bit. This was a satirical complaint that husbands were spending all their time at coffee houses gossiping like women instead of being productive and being at home. This actually kind of touches on a critique, which is in 17th century England, coffee houses were almost exclusively male spaces. Women owned and ran many of them. A lot of them were known as the term was coffee woman, but they were really welcome in as patrons. So this is exactly what fueled the frustration and the women's petition against coffee. Now, again, it was satire, but there is a like an ounce of truth in it, right? There is this idea of, again, if we're supposed to have this neutral ground where everyone's equal regardless of social class or anything, then why in the hell are we not having women in there as well?
Exactly.
And we see this kind of happen throughout history and other places. You know, in the South, we have barbershops or salons, right? Which are these, like, nowadays, like, you can kind of go in anyone and that's where you go. But historically, a barbershop was for a man and a salon was for a woman. And that's where you would go, you know, you'd go and get your hair cut, smoke a cigar, have a drink, chat, you know, a little bit of whiskey or something, chat with your barber, get the sort of town gossip and everything. And then you would go to like a salon if you're a woman and get that done there. We also see this happening in the general store in the South, you know, where that's sort of the front porch of the town. It's where we get regional history and tall tales. And then we also see this popping up in other cultures, such as tea houses in East Asia. But what is really, really interesting is later on, we get this thing that pops up, which is the tea garden in the 18th century. And later, the department store cafe, right? And so in the 19th century, that finally broke the gender barrier of public hanging out. So women are finally sort of allowed to occupy these third places without a male escort. And so that's really where we start to see this like sort of boom of culture clash and like come in, and we really have a true, in my argument, a true version of a third place. Mm-hmm. So we kind of been talking a little bit about the golden age, but we do have to sort of get into the modern reality. There are some major critiques of a third place concept, specifically regarding who they are actually for and who they might be pushing out. One of the biggest things that we've talked about, and you kind of mentioned, was youth, right? Yeah. There is one of the biggest sort of modern day critiques of third places is the cost of entry. So Oldenburg's original idea was that a third place should be expensive, but most of the businesses are businesses first, right? I see this all the time. If you're not buying a $7 latte every hour, are you still a regular or are you loitering? When are you existing in public becomes a financial transaction, then the leveler pillar actually completely breaks down. I know that you're looking at this from a broader perspective. You know, you're outside of, you know, you're in Western North Carolina, but I know that you kind of travel a couple different places in the cities that you like study and work for. Are you seeing a lot of like pay to play barrier making it harder for people to just exist?
I think right now the cost of living is just astronomical for anyone. Everything is so expensive right now. And so I do feel like there's not as many places that you can go to exist to not spend money. And I think that's like across the board for like lots of people. We've mentioned my fiance and I like we're planning a wedding. And so we are very much in the throes of that and like trying to be like, okay, we still want to do things because we don't want to just like go to work, come home, sleep, rinse, repeat. But like, we don't have a lot of extra spending money because we're putting it all towards like this wedding that we're planning. And so it's like, what can we do that's like free or like doesn't cost very much? That's still a fun activity out of the house. And like, we have a really rough time with that. A lot of times what we've been doing is like going to like an outside space. And so we've been going on a lot of walks. And that was actually like my third place growing up in like my hometown. There is a little like man-made lake and we would walk around the lake. And that was like really the only thing that you could do. Like in a small town, we would walk with the lake or we would go walk around Walmart because at the time it was like 24 hours or like go to the local Sonic. And those were the three things that you did as a teenager. And so we would walk around the lake. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now too, is like outdoor things. But like today it's pouring down rain. And like typically we do on Wednesdays as we're recording this, like we would be on a walk right now, but like it's raining. And so I can't. And so it's like barriers with that too, of like weather. And so I feel like there's just so many barriers to try to get to like all of those pillars. Like I feel like they're all like very specific and in a perfect world would like be able to make a lot of sense, but like I feel like it's hard to like check all of the boxes.
No, I would actually agree. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, which is what we kind of mentioned earlier. So if you were to ask like a teenager or somebody in their like 20 somethings, right, where their third place is, they're probably not going to say the library, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not a dig at that generation. It's just libraries around the country are shutting down.
Yeah.
Or no longer accessible because of the hours they're in, right? We've
Yeah.
got students that are in class from, at the latest 8 a.m. to at least 3 or 4 every day. And then you've got, the distance to commute to work. They've got homework, hours upon hours of homework. Where can they go to sort of get their, for lack of a better term, news, right? Or their pop
Mhm.
culture information? And the place that they're going to go is like TikTok or Instagram, and on paper, it does look like that would fit. It's accessible, it's playful. You have your regulars, the regulars being, of course, the creators that you follow every day. But here is the problem, right? The algorithm in this case is the host. So in a true third place, the leveler means you might run into someone you disagree with or someone from a totally different walk of life. But on TikTok or Instagram, you are in a curated silo. You're only going to see what the math thinks you already like. So I've heard social media described as a digital third place, but is it actually a place or is it just a performance? What do you think, Laura?
I think that I probably agree with you, or like I bet we probably have some pretty similar thoughts around this. I think that there's just something about being face to face with someone that makes a difference that like you are missing if you are like mostly communicating with people online. I know like a lot of youth too, like that's just opened up a lot of doors to like people that like they might get bullied at school, or they might like not have any friends in person that are able to turn to this virtual space. But I feel like that too, it's a double-edged sword of like you have that, but then too like you're exposed to just so much through social media, and then you're also missing like that in-person connection, and it's still leading to like a lot of loneliness, a lot of depression, and it's just not a good like substitute for that in-person friendship too.
One of the things that I think is interesting about it is that when you're in person, you sort of learn a set of sort of soft skills, right? You actually see the look on your neighbor's face if you say something stupid. You have to actually navigate that social friction. When you have things like Instagram or TikTok, you're getting a like or like a block or a reshare. There's none of that social feedback that you actually get by being in person. And I do want to acknowledge, which during the pandemic, these apps, of course, did act as a bridge, right? And
Yes.
then that is really wonderful. But in 2026, we're now seeing like this idea of this social thinning where we have 5,000 friends, but we don't have anyone to sit on a porch with.
Yeah.
And I know that that's something when I first met my former roommate / your fiance, that was one thing that he really brought up to me, is that his interest was building a social circle.
Yeah.
And it really was his like his thought, his thing was for the next year. And this was, of course, before y'all started dating. But he said, yeah, I just want to get out and I want to meet people, really get involved with the community. One of the reasons he said he was like moving in with me is because, well, he could, yes, afford his own place. He wanted the opportunity to get out and do things.
Yeah, I think that is like a really big piece of it too. Like the fact that like he had to make that decision and like actively act on that decision, I think made the difference. He's a very outgoing, very extroverted, and I know for like myself, I'm not as extroverted. And so I think like I haven't moved around as often as like the two of you had, and so I think I would have really struggled to like go to a new spot where I didn't know anyone, that I was moving in with someone that I didn't know, which like he really lucked out, but like that's not always the case. And so like, and to be like, okay, I'm gonna make the best of it, I'm gonna try to meet people, I'm gonna go out of my comfort zone and do things, and like that's really hard for a lot of people. I know, like we said, like you've moved around a couple of times. Like how do you kind of navigate doing that, like finding those third spaces in new communities where you don't know anyone? Do you kind of make that choice too and like have to act on it, or like what strategies do you use?
That's a great question. And the answer is, it is definitely, I have to push myself to do it. So I'm going to talk later on a little bit about digital third places. And I'm lucky enough that I'm in a Discord server with a group of people that I play games with every single night. I honestly would consider them some of my best friends, even though some of them I haven't even met in person. I was really struggling. I know there's a lot of argument to be made about introvert, extrovert, omnivert, all of that stuff. I'm Absolutely that person that I love talking to people. I love being around people. Most of the time when I take jobs, it's working with people. But at the end of the day, sometimes I need a space to decompress. And so for me, often finding places like that does require a certain amount of energy because I have to sort of be okay to go out and talk to people and be open to the experience. 9 out of 10 times, what I do is, and this is, like we're going to talk a little bit about this stuff in the digital age, but a lot of the times I'll start by like Googling a coffee shop in my area or Googling tea houses, anything that sort of strikes my interest. And that's kind of how I move towards it. It is really difficult because you have to bring yourself to the point where you're open and willing to do that. I know I recently visited Finlay Market, which is sort of like this amazing farmers market that has all sorts of produce and everything. It's also like so many restaurants and individual vendors. And I got talking to one of the butchers, and we were like having this really cool conversation about how he procures his meat and what he has his thoughts on ethics of doing that and all this sort of stuff. And we had this wild conversation. It's not something I could Google. I can't just be like, yeah, well, I mean, I could like Google and be like, well, what are the ethics of meat packing? But I just like actually having this person's individual, perception of everything and what he feels is right versus wrong helped me become a bit more informed as well. He also gave me some really nice tips on how to make this stuff, which is cool. But you kind of tapped into one of the other major critiques, which is homophilia. It's the idea that we naturally gravitate towards people who are just like us. And so your question, which is how do you find these places? Well, I'm sort of naturally drawn to the things that interest me. So there's a lot of pro and con to that, but Oldenburg loved the idea of the leveler. But in reality, people often seek out third places that reinforce their own social circle. So you have like a tech coffee shop, a punk dive bar, a corporate bistro. Instead of being in a place where different worlds of culture collide, they actually become this sort of like high end echo chamber.
And I think that like brings a good point like back to our experience with the third place during the hurricane of like leveling down. And so we were able to have a third place that didn't have all of these other like extra things because we were kind of forced to be like in that area. But like again, it's like it shouldn't take that to like be able to find a third place.
Yeah, I mean, I 1,000% agree. I guess one of my questions for you is that you sort of have this bird's eye view of different urban environments. Given the nature of your work and also just as a person, do you even think it's possible to design a true third space, not including like a hurricane or a natural disaster? Do you think it's possible to design a space that actually forces different types of people to interact anymore? Or are we just building silos with better espresso?
That's a really good question. I definitely think that we can. I think again, like going back on kind of my experience of like kind of the more outdoors like third spaces of like going on walks and things like that, or like going into, I know my fiance and I have kind of talked about this topic for a little bit, and like he lived in Italy for a while, and he talked about how there's like this big like basically like town square, but it's like just a really big open like park area, and how if you didn't have plans, like you would go to this park and like you would end up finding people to talk to, you would bring your like dinner there and like end up eating there and like hanging out with people, meeting new people. And so I feel like things like that are like definitely doable. But it's just again hard to like check all of those boxes if we're thinking like 8 pillars, like those, that's hard to do. um and again, like as we said, each person might have such a different view of like what a third space might be to them, and it might be really specific on what their life is like at that time. Like they might need different things when they're going through different things, and so I think like it could be hard to like fit into the box of that. And so maybe we're overcomplicating it. Maybe like we're thinking that like they have to have all 8 of these pillars, or like it has to be like this perfect space. Because in that sense, like nothing's gonna be perfect. And so like I think there's like a sense of thinking about it too, of like being able to think through what's like close enough, or like what is like good enough to still get like the needs met. And so again, like honing down on like what is like the appeal of a third space. So again, somewhere where you can like exist outside of work, outside of school, outside of home, and just like be yourself, like be able to experience things that like fill your cup, and then kind of going from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's actually one of my critiques of Oldenburg's theory is does it actually have to check all of the boxes to be a third space? What are we hoping to accomplish?
Yeah.
Like, what is the entire point of this episode, right? What is a third place? Great, but can a third place exist outside of those 8 pillars? And I think, I truly do. But with all of this, we've spent a lot of time talking about physical buildings, coffee houses and pubs, but we really can't talk about 2026 without talking about the internet. Like we were mentioning, it doesn't necessarily have to check all of the 8 pillars. So for a lot of us, our third place isn't a building down the street. It's a Discord server, a guild chat, or an MMO, or a specific subreddit. And that brings us to what a lot of people refer to as the one desk paradox. And on that, I'm going to end the episode here. And we're going to come back next time. We're going to talk a little bit about the one desk paradox, what it is, what digital spaces look like, and what do we do now? What does the sort of micro third places look like? And then I'm going to give everyone a challenge. So make sure you tune in next time. And with that, the curtain closes on this week's obsession. Thanks for pulling up a chair and diving in the deep end with me. If you'd like to feed the machine and support this strange little show, you could find our tip jar links in the notes below. It's never expected, but it goes a long way towards keeping the ghost happy. And while you're down there, please follow and share the show with another beautifully bizarre soul. It really is the best way to help our corner of the static grow. Have a dark history footnote, a lonely cryptid, or a digital mystery you think I need to absolutely fixate on? Send your thoughts via carrier pigeon, or just reach out on Instagram at mylatestfixationpod, or email me at mylatestfixationpod@gmail.com. Stay curious, stay obsessed, and I'll catch you in the next one.